And all right, everyone, welcome. Please continue introducing yourselves and we will just get into the presentation. This will be recorded, by the way. So if you miss anything, you have to jump off early, no problem. We'll send you the link. Anyway, so thank you so much for joining us. I'm Maddie Martin. I'm the VP of Marketing at SMITH.AI. We are a 24/7 virtual receptionist service. We are Regina's service as well. And Regina and I have presented together a number of times, most recently at the ABA Tech Show. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today is our presentation there, which was, starting with the best, building the right intake process, where we talk a lot about general best practices and really dive into best practices Regina has found herself. So without further ado, before we get into the meat of the presentation, Regina, do you want to just say a few words? I think most of the folks here know who you are, but just a few words for anyone who's not super familiar with you.
Hey, so my name is Regina Edwards. I practice family law and I have for 20 years. 21 actually. So I like to travel. I never like to be at home. So I have to have systems in place that allow me to do that. So I've been traveling a lot, at least 50% of the time since 2015. I haven't had a phone in my office since 2012, I think. I started using answering services well before. I feel like you somehow gave me your cough, Maddie. Actually, I did a hike this morning. It was windy and it was a mess. Anyway, so I've had to have systems in place in order to have this kind of virtual lifestyle. So I started answering services. Yeah, it was quite some time ago. I used Ruby for a while, and then I realized before they got sued that they were ripping everybody off with their kind of per minute shenanigans. So the great thing about Smith, it's per call, so it saved me a ton of money. And
Oh, I'm frozen for some reason. Is anyone seeing Regina frozen? Or is that me?
Oh.
Frozen. Oh, Regina, are you okay? There you go. All right, all set.
Okay, sorry, I'm back. Where was I? Oh, okay, so you guys are going to see my intake forms because a lot of people ask about how do you screen out people or how do you kind of watch for red flags. I'm actually going to grab something to drink in a second.
Sure, no problem.
But you can do that in the intake form. I have found questions for my area of practice that are really helpful are basically just an open-ended question. What are you looking for and how do you want an attorney to help you? And you'd be surprised at how many responses I get where people self-select out, because people literally will write, I want you to make my wife's life a living hell. It's like, probably not the attorney.
No, thank you.
Or I ask, what are you looking for in an attorney? And some people say someone that will answer my calls 24 hours a day. And I'm like, oh, we're not a good fit. And I also, because I'm flat fee and because we're super efficient, we are paperless. We do not accept documents from clients other than for them to be scanned. So we ask in our initial, intake, are you comfortable with us being paperless? Are you comfortable with scanning? Are you comfortable with us communicating mostly by email? And quite frankly, some people aren't. And if they aren't, then we're just not the firm for them. So I ask questions, usually to think about what's important to you in your practice and how you want to run your firm. And then just honestly get that out of the way in the beginning. So you're not ending up stuck with someone that really expected you to give them your cell phone number or something. So.
Right. Yeah. Setting expectations up front. And also that'll lead us into the first few topics. So I'll get started, Regina, if you want to jump and get some water or anything. So sure. Let me present. Hello. Share what there we go. Wrong button. All the buttons look the same. Okay. All right. So what we're going to cover is how to design your intake process that best serves your firm and your clients. And we'll talk about, how you can do both harmoniously. And then reducing bias and inconsistency. Also making sure that you're giving access to multiple communication channels, because that's a really easy way to prevent bias and to resolve inconsistencies in the intake process. How to leverage software and services so that you're not doing all of this yourself, and so that it's really streamlined and efficient and giving you consistent results every single time. Then we'll talk about specifically the intake forms and workflows that Regina has thought a lot about and refined many times over time. And how do we turn this intake form also into a tool for marketing campaigns? That's something that I'll cover. And lastly, like how to make a potential client feel like they're working with you. It's completely personalized. It's about them, but you're not always directly involved with every single interaction that goes through your firm. I did share in the chat, and I will make sure to share that again, just in case that didn't come through when you join later. That link is to actually the entire slide deck that we did at Tech Show. So it's the same thing. You'll see there's different branding, obviously, for Tech Show, and the slides are exactly the same. So you'll be able to follow along if you want to, or just for your access at another time. That also will give you access to this link. If you go on our YouTube channel, you'll see that one of actually several videos that Regina and I have done together are on there on the SMITH.AI YouTube channel. So that's an additional, access to content beyond today's presentation. All right, so, how are we designing this intake process? So one of the things that's really important is aligning with your client avatar and target audience, and also your marketing mix, which I'll get to in a second, so that we know, well, who's actually contacting your firm. If they're all referrals, like Regina was talking about, making sure that your intake process is also a screening mechanism, especially important in family law and some other areas. Maybe not as much for, firms that are getting a ton of referrals, or firms that are in a specific practice area where there's not as much noise or difficulty working with clients. And, how does that allow you to say, here's my ideal client, I'm getting a lot of referrals, or I'm growing and referrals are not as big a percent of my business as it once was now that I'm advertising and marketing. Well, that means we need to be a little bit more strict, because not everyone's going to be such a well-qualified fit. Are we documenting everything up front? Because that's really where the best intake forms are born out of. If you're saying, in every conversation, here are notes, this person was a good fit, wasn't a good fit, and why, so that you can then feed that back into your intake process. That's an area where we see a lot of, opening up access to delegation. So if you have these things documented, here's the way to, run intake. Here's the way to think about questions during intake. Well, you can train someone once you have those things documented. But if you're just going through every single call and you're handling it yourself, your notes are your own, they're not shared within the team, then how could anyone learn from you and see what these patterns are that they can identify themselves? Then you can delegate it once you've documented it. Like, here's your training guide, and here's how to follow the training guide, and deciding what systems to use so that remote teams can pipe data into there. They can complete an intake form online. It's not on a legal pad. Developing the script so that the language is consistent every time, and that the workflows are also triggered and not requiring manual data entry. So you've got that efficiency and that speed of access, which is really important for proper follow through. So laying out these steps really starts with identifying first, who are you talking to on a daily basis? Like, again, are these all referrals, or are they coming from what is often the case, multiple different channels, advertising, maybe content, maybe you're featured in some, articles, maybe there's email marketing that you're doing, and there are, various degrees of strength of the leads in there, meaning like, some of your newsletter list might be people who are almost ready to work with you and start spending money, or there may be people who are just community constituents who are never going to become clients. So there's a wide range in there. And what you can expect from these channels over time is that they will increasingly become more diverse, typically, as your business, as your law firm is growing. So right now, if you're getting a ton of referrals, what you have to look out for is, I don't have to be super choosy right now, but in the future, I need to be more choosy. And am I going to be prepared when I get there? Because it's probably sooner than you expect. And it confronts a lot of firms to say, I didn't expect to have to pick this criteria, right? It was so easy for so long. So what happens when a new lead finds your firm, what we're focused on for this conversation is like really that qualification and intake process before the consult has happened. And there might be, a conflict check, there might be some other activities in here, but typically it's like those first 5 to 7 questions where you figure out, is this person even in the right zip code? Are they looking for the right area of law, that I can help with, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason this is so important, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here so we can really get into the details, because we just have, a little bit of time today. It's so important because this is a huge competitive advantage when you get it right, because most attorneys are not doing this to the extent that the clients want it to be done, meaning people are not responding quickly enough to them. They're letting their calls go to voicemail. They don't have, chat enabled on their website. They don't know that they can respond to text messages, that their phone even accepts them. They are contacting more than one firm, even for referrals, because they're posting on Facebook instead of sending, a text or asking at the dinner table. So they're getting tons of recommendations, not just one anymore. And as a result, the impact that a client, their speed to decision making is really significant, because they're saying, we're basing our decision on the whole, these potential clients, on how responsive a firm is. So if you're responsive across multiple channels, if you can get back to them right away, you're extremely likely to get that business, even if you're not the best salesperson, or you are even slightly delayed on other down funnel parts of it, like sending a contract. You're probably still going to get that business if you're the first person to respond, which is really powerful. It's also really frustrating when you feel you're the best firm in the market for a certain type of, law firm client, and you're slow to respond and you miss that business, even though you might be the most qualified person to take it on. So you don't even get to have the consultation until you get to the point where you're responding quickly, and then we can solve for intake. So if you're not solving for responsiveness first, that's the first problem to solve. And then the immediate next step is recognizing that there's a sense of urgency and relief, and that you can convey that sense of expertise, understanding of urgency with the questions that you bring forward, or that your team or receptionist brings forward on that first conversation. And that's the opportunity to really start laying the groundwork for, is this a fit? Is this not a fit? And how do you demonstrate expertise and fit with asking the right questions, and establishing trust and listening, so that you can say, this does seem like a good fit, or this is not a good fit, we're going to refer you to another firm. So all of these, questions are going to affect your in-office processes, and then your perception by the public, and the experience that you give, which obviously carries over into the referrals that you get later on, the whole client experience. Your intake sets the stage for everything else that has to do with your firm, your reviews and reputation, how easy it is to work with these clients, and identifying those red flags so that you're not, consuming a ton of time stealing away from other clients when you're working with people who are not a good fit, that could have been screened out in the first place. So the last thing that I'm just going to cover before we get into, the meat of it is, when you're thinking, well, what are the opportunities here to improve, my firm's operations, the cost of client acquisition, et cetera. Think about how much it's going to impact your firm without spending any more money on marketing. That's where I think there's a huge opportunity. If you respond really quickly to, your website visitors, people who call, et cetera, and you've got this pool of, visitors or potential leads at the outset. If you're able to engage them and qualify more of them more effectively, you don't have to necessarily spend, quite so much more money on marketing if you can capitalize more on the existing lead pool. So this is really powerful and effective in getting more out of your marketing spend, if you can just solve these first 2 lines here around all right, I'm going to focus on the qualified leads, those opportunities that are going to turn into consultations with a high likelihood. And then I don't have to worry about turning my, web visitors, up a notch. I can do more out of that, and set a strong baseline for, if I've got 1,000 visitors, how many of them can I actually convert? If I've got 500 callers, how many of those can I convert to clients? you can change that conversion rate. And then when you spend marketing dollars on it, you know exactly what the maximized impact is going to be on your firm, right? You fix the system first and then you pour money into it. You don't pour money into it knowing that there's a leaky bucket. That would be foolish, right? So there is a chart for you to work on that, on your own time. And what we want to talk about now is just like, the flow of intake and specifically how Regina is handling it. So these are some, workflows to identify, like some of our processes are quite simple and some end up being more complex, and especially in a law firm where we have a conflict check, we have, consultation, and then there's a retainer, and there's casework, and there's review requests. Like the entire client lifecycle ends up looking pretty substantial for all the different stages from lead to close that come through. What we want to do is say, how do we make sure the work we're doing for clients is going to be the work that we want to do with our firm? And we start with intake. So what are the different areas where we need to identify, this is information I need up front in order to know, am I going to choose this client or not? And do I want this client to want to work with me? Like, am I building, a relationship here at the same time? So again, you have the link to the slides if you want to, follow along on this. I'm actually going to go to a little bit later in the deck, just so that we can talk, Regina, about, so this is slide 30. We can talk about your exact forms as well, which apparently I can't do that from one specific slide. So bear with me. Okay, there we go. Okay, so Regina, do you want to just talk about how you have built out your intake map and how it's changed over time?
Yeah, it's constantly evolving. There's times I try things and doesn't work, and I have no problems backing up and starting over. And this looks kind of complicated, but it really isn't. So you obviously start in the top left corner. I get clients coming to me in three main ways. There are other ways, but those are the main commons. They just call in, and then this is where the answering service fills out the intake form. That is probably 95% of how people get in the door. Or a client emails. If they email, sometimes we'll fill out the intake for them to get them in the system, or sometimes we'll just reply with a canned email saying, hey, fill out this form, and then they get into the system. And then the other option is sometimes they go directly to the website and they fill out the form there and they get in. And yeah, can you go to you were on the forms for a second. Yeah, these are the forms. They're two different ones. The one on the left is the shorter one for Smith, and I have a much longer one that the client fills out themselves. But you have to think about what are the things that that you need to know in order to even consider taking a case. So these are the things that are very important to me. I want to know what county they live in, and I want to know what county the other party lives in, because at this point I'm only practicing in 2 out of the 150 counties. I don't even know how many counties we have in Georgia. So if both of those counties are in places I do not practice, they automatically get disqualified. And it's very easy for me to I click a button. By the way, I did this in March. I was using Law Hustle. I'm using Lawmatics now, so the process is a little bit different, but the effect is the same. So I just tag them as out of county, and just with one click of the button, they will get a text message declining the case and links to referrals. They will get an email declining the case with links to referrals, and this will go out of my pipeline to review into the closed pipeline, and that's just with one click. So it's super easy. So again, I can disqualify people if they don't live in the right county. I ask if they have children, because honestly, right now, I'm not really interested in doing contested custody cases. So if they have children, it automatically puts them in a maybe category. In any event, I ask how they plan to pay for fees in the case, because I want people to have thought about it. And, sometimes people say they don't want to know, or, they really have no plans to pay. That is something that might also be a red flag. And then I ask, in order to provide our fees, we're paperless. You must be comfortable with email scanning and use of a client portal in order to be a client. Is that okay? And sometimes people say no, and that's fine. We can refer them elsewhere. And then I also ask the kind of open-ended question, describe the issues you're having and how we can help. And I get a lot of responses there. that honestly disqualified people. And the longer intake form, I ask other questions like how much money do you make? How much does the other party make? If there's a case in progress, if there is, what county is it in? That's super helpful for me because my intake person can look up the case, and when they call back, they're ready to go with information. I see your case was filed on April 4th and you have a status conference on April 15th. Let me tell you a little bit about that. So it helps the conversation a little bit better if we get that information ahead of time. We're able to do a little bit of research. So she's asking me how Lawmatics interfaces with SMITH. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. I think they have a native integration. I don't use it. This is my form that I create on Lawmatics, and I just send the link to the answering service. So they fill out the form as if they were the client, and it goes directly in. So the other way to do it is just you really, I think you get the name and the phone number and all this other stuff. But not as much as the intake form. So I just prefer to do this way. I've always done it this way, which is I create a form inside my practice management system, and I just send the link to the answering service and they fill out the link. So honestly, anything that you're using will integrate with SMITH. So you don't have to have that super tight integration. People will just kind of get super excited about tight integrations, but it's almost not necessary.
But let me say that for a second, Regina, totally. So what Regina is saying, just so that it's totally clear, is that if you have an intake form that you might post to your website, you might share via email, anything that has a shareable link that doesn't require a login, right? So if I were to get this link and it prompted me to log in to Regina's Lawmatics, that would be like a closed intake form that your clients couldn't use unless maybe they already had a portal. You had a user that you have to then pay for, thank you. So most of the practice management solutions out there right now, and lead management solutions like Lawmatics, which are more like a CRM, will allow you to grab the link to an intake form. And here Regina has a couple. You could use Typeform, Jotform, whatever it is. You could use Clio and Clio Grow forms, right? And you could even use Calendly, which is a booking link that also has qualifying questions in it, or any questions in it, before you schedule an appointment, right? And you can make them mandatory or not, as some are here, and you can see that with the little asterisk. Now, the interesting thing is, any link that you can also share with SMITH.AI. We just need instructions to understand, when do we ask these questions? Is it up front and then we're allowed to schedule an appointment? Do they have to answer questions in a certain way in order to be offered an appointment? Because, you might see that there's the question, what county do you live in? And we know from working with Regina, just as we would work with your firm, or we do work with your firm, that if there's a certain county mentioned, let's say it's not a drop-down menu, but it's actually a write-in field, as some of you might have. If it's a write-in field and it doesn't match the fields that Regina is going to work in those counties, then we're going to have a different prompt rather than just scheduling an appointment or consultation with everyone who just fills in the form. So there are some questions on here that are actually really filtering mechanisms, and some questions that are just intake where we need to gather that information. Like anything that's going to determine, is it the right county, or are there children and Regina's not doing contested divorces, or, is there a conflict check that needs to happen because we have the name and the other party name and there's a conflict? That means we're not going to schedule the appointment. We're going to send this information to the firm, and then they're going to follow up and say, we confirm this, conflict, and we're not going to be able to work with you, or whatever. So there are different prompts that happen, and some of your questions you'll find are demographic information. So it's like, name, email, phone number. Some of them are filtering, which is county or other questions that you might have, practice area, et cetera. And one of the ways to do really good filtering is what Regina has done here, which is there are only a few fields that are actually write-ins. The ones that need to be filters are drop-down menus. So if you don't see the right county, you might actually not be able to submit and complete the form. And as a result, the receptionist is going to say, those are not one of the counties that we, this firm serves, and so on. You might still have to send an email to that gathered information, which would come from the call summary. and say, we're not your firm, you have to confirm that. That's obviously, according to your bar rules. So it's something to consider here. How does this intake form get composed of questions that are used in various ways, either for capturing information or for filtering or for next steps? If the form gets completed, then you might book an appointment, or you might leave it up to, the rest of Regina's team or your team.
I also have disqualifiers that are not actually in the form. For example, I don't handle cases where defects is involved. That's Department of Family and Children's Services. Some states call it CPS, whatever it is. I don't do cases with them. So if they're involved, they just get cut off at the jump. And they're just told, I'm sorry, we don't handle cases like that. So some of the county cases, the form actually does go through, but I have automations, and I've got probably 5 or 6 referrals that I use on a regular basis for different counties. So for example, it was a Douglas County case that comes in. I just click one button that says refer to, the attorney that I want to refer it to, and the client will get a text and an email with the attorney's information, and it will move it to the pipeline that says referred out. So it's really little work. Plus, the client doesn't feel like I'm just shunting them aside. I'm actually giving them a referral to someone else. And I've found that to be pretty helpful. So just so you're wondering, I intentionally have friction built into my intake process. You don't have to do it this way. I get the form, and I actually don't have Smith schedule anything because honestly, I just don't want to. I'd prefer to have my paralegal pre-screen before that. So we get the form, and if it's something within our practice areas, my intake person calls back, gets a lot more information, fees, which are $20,000, and I usually give them a range. Like for this type of case, your fee is usually going to be between $15,000 and $20,000. Is that fine? And if they say yes, then we schedule them. I don't schedule them otherwise. I know that sales people will tell you not to do it that way. I don't give a shit at this point. I just don't have time to do consultations, paid or not, with people that look like a deer in headlights when I quote them my fee at the end. So if they are fine with the range, then I schedule them. So obviously that just depends on how many calls you're getting. I'm getting like 15 to 30 a day. So I can build that friction in. If you're not getting that many calls, if you need more business, then you reduce that friction. And if you're okay with taking consultations within your practice area, as long as they meet very minimal requirements, then you certainly can build it that way. And then you can just change as you go along.
Right. Right, exactly. And like, it really does determine your approach is determined by your growth stage, right? So what Regina is getting at is, 50 calls could be a lot or a little for your practice in a day. If you have really high volume and you have multiple offices, and that's the total across the offices for a number of attorneys, 50 calls might be not actually a lot. Regina, in your past law firm, that number might have looked completely different versus, your current firm. So, think about, well, what does that mean for my business? What's my conversion rate typically? Like, are the leads who are coming through like sincere, ready? There are some questions on here that you might add, and we can go back actually to where we have, well, this is one example, but first I want to go to the intake form general sort of outline, which is, there are questions that are going to be on here that might not seem intuitive, which is, how ready are you to hire an attorney right now? And you might ask them on a scale from 1 to 10. You might say, have you identified how you're going to pay for these services? Like, have you budgeted for this? I mean, there might be some questions relevant to your practice area, obviously not for contingency practices, but for others, where you're going to need to know certain things about, like, how hard am I going to work to get this seemingly really well qualified client, and let the form do a lot of work for you, and let it be consistent through the form, because it's really easy to forget a question. But if you literally have to fill out the form and can't submit it because you missed that question, you got to go back and answer that question, right? Or ask it of the lead. So whether you're doing this or paralegal is doing this, intake specialist, SMITH.AI, whoever, like, those questions are going to need to be either mandatory or optional, and that will determine, all right, what's actually required out of this form, what's nice to have versus what's necessary. And then the other thing that I would say is, like, this form can work let me get to this example. So Cooper Law, Minnesota. Got a few examples of, here are the fields that we need to fill out. Quite, simple. When you submit this information, then you get to book a consultation with the firm. What's the legal issue? Is there a court hearing scheduled? Ideally, you're actually asking, like, if there is a court hearing scheduled, when is it? So you get the date in addition to just the answer at the same time. But these are questions that you might use through website chat. These are questions that you might use through Facebook Messenger when people are getting recommended to contact your firm and they're not even going to Google. You might have these that you answer through Google My Business, through your Google Business profile. What are all the ways that people are reaching out to you? Are they texting you? Same questions. So standardizing all those questions across every single communication channel is going to get that consistency. And it will also help you feel like, man, Facebook leads are not good quality, or text leads are not good quality. But why is that? Is that because you're not asking them sincere questions as soon as they come in, or you're not treating them with the same level of intent that a phone call lead might have, or an online lead? If you're asking questions in your online form, those should be the same questions that you ask across every single channel, and the same opportunities that you're providing across all those channels. Because what we're seeing right now, before we all live in the metaverse, is that there's text, there's chat, there's calls, and there are some in-app messages that are very relevant to businesses if they take them as seriously as the lead is intending them to be. And you can screen them out just as effectively. So that's one of the things to consider. And you're already on those channels typically. One thing that I will recommend is that if you don't think you're getting text messages, for example, and you're not checking if you have text messages through your business phone, see if your business phone is getting text and you haven't logged into that particular dashboard, you don't have the app on your phone, etc. We do find that, like, there is a technology gap sometimes that occurs where you aren't fully up to speed on what your phone system can do. People are texting you and you just aren't responding because you don't know that they're there. So there's a little bit of an inventory here first, and then setting up these systems and processes for each of those communication channels. And the thing that I would also say is, like, you should be considering, like, recording and reviewing the transcripts of your calls, because, according to, your state law, you might have to disclose this. Obviously, it's something that we have added as a new capability at SMITH.AI that you can request to get call recording, which is brand new. We haven't even announced it publicly yet. So here you go for Regina's crew. And the beauty of this is that you can get a lot more processing done than having to, manually sit in on every call or listen to every call and take time from your day. With the transcripts, you can read much faster than you can listen to a 30-minute call or 10-minute call. And you can identify, like, well, what are some of the questions that people are asking that we're not considering in our intake form? What are some of the things that are tripping people up? For example, someone might have SMITH.AI answering calls and they ask a question. Well, then what do you do? Because if your only instruction is you ask all the questions, you're filling out the intake form, and you haven't told us basic FAQs, that's another thing to build into, your business profile with SMITH.AI. Here are common questions, and here are our answers to them, or don't answer them. That's beyond your scope of work. Just take down that question and we will respond to it if we, need to respond to it, right? So it doesn't mean like we have to do that, but how do we handle the situation when we get those questions is also important. And that would be the same for your paralegal, for whoever works with your team.
And that's why I think it's important for my intake person to really read the messages that we get, because we do, because, we'll get a message from Smith that says so-and-so calls and he wants to know if, his wife can get alimony. Obviously, nobody can answer that on the first call, not even me. But you can train your person to call back, say, I know that this is a concern of yours, and this is something that Regina has handled, over and over again for the past 20 years. And obviously her goal would be to minimize or eliminate any alimony that would have to be paid, and that's something that you can discuss with her on the call. So so that means the question is not answered at that point. But the point is you're communicating to the client that you heard what their concern is, and that's something that I can handle, and then it will be addressed, during the consultation or representation or whatever.
Yeah, and actually, before we even had this presentation, I was getting a few emails. One from one person in particular said, I have CallRail, or I have a call recording with my call tracking software. You may have heard of What Converts, which is actually what SMITH.AI uses, or call tracking metrics, or CallRail, which is a really popular one. And what we find is those are really great systems for identifying where the lead's coming from, because you can say, well, they called this phone number, so we know they came from organic search or Facebook ads or whatever. Those actually work hand in hand with SMITH.AI to say, all right, well, we know that the leads who are all coming from organic search are, they have a lot more questions versus the referrals who are not peppering us with so many questions. Now, do we take up the time and answer those? Well, no, we know that organic search leads are way less likely to convert. We're not going to, spend all the time on that. We'll say, here are the questions that they asked. Why don't we answer those and also put them up on the website if we know that these are coming from organic search? Then we can put them up on the website, which is how we're appearing in organic search through the homepage or whatever, and proactively try and answer those. And then through chat, engage with chat so you can eliminate those calls in the first place, or at least cut down the number of calls that are just peppering with basic questions. Say, well, Regina might get questions that are how long does it take to get divorced in Georgia? Right? There might be some basic questions where they're oh, I'm just going to contact a law firm about this, even though I have no intent of hiring. You can eliminate a lot of those calls. And then the calls that you do handle where we're talking about the intake are much more valuable, right? And that's one of the reasons why, you want to be developing that website content, is not just to attract, leads, but also for those leads who are there, you're giving them, you're doing a service by answering those basic common questions, making that available on your website, and maybe even adding, firms you might refer to in other, surrounding counties, or for other practice areas that are adjacent. Maybe you have an immigration firm or an estate planning firm or other firms that you want to refer to on your website, so that you can just point to that resource. And again, there's less work in this entire process that revolves around your involvement. So one of the things, Regina started talking about the solutions that she's using, including Lawmatics. And, I'd like Regina to share how she thinks about this. But when I think about, the software and services that make sense for solo and small firms in particular, you want them to be affordable, You want them to also be customizable. So as your firm changes, can you easily change your forms? What does that mean for the next step in the workflow? Can they flex as you grow? And can they be what you need them to be at the very start? Are they easy to use and monitor? So if you have to log into 10 different programs to monitor your firm during the day, that's just not going to happen. You're not going to monitor the firm activities as you need to based on even ethics guidelines, right? So how easy is it for you to monitor is a major business matter that you want to keep a close eye on. The more consolidated you can keep your systems, the easier they are to keep track of. And that even goes with, solutions where your team is getting work done. You might have project management software in addition to practice management software. And then how comprehensive are they? So can you actually take action on that casework? Obviously, we know Clio and Clio Grow, they bought Lexicata and turned it into Clio Grow because there's more benefit in having that entire workflow from lead to, new case that's happening. And then does it integrate with your existing processes? So you might say, I've got Clio, but I don't want Clio Grow. I want to use Lawmatics to bring into, Clio the work that I've closed. I've got a new client thanks to, the lead that I worked in Lawmatics. Can those two systems talk to each other? Because those are your preferred systems. You don't want to have everything consolidated. Well, fine. So those systems that work together are going to allow you more flexibility and control without holding you captive within an existing solution that might not in every piece of it work for what you need. Regina, do you want to talk about this?
Well, I was going to say Lawmatics has a really robust Zapier integration, which is one of the reasons I switched from Lawsol, because Lawsol had one entry condition, which made no sense to me. So Lawmatics has a bunch of entry conditions. So
you want to talk about entry conditions? What are entry conditions?
So basically, most people know that Zapier is basically a program that stitches together two completely separate programs. So some of the integrations I have are when my intake coordinator puts a note into Lawmatics, I can get a notification in Lawmatics, but I don't really have Lawmatics open all the time, and they actually don't even have an app. So my Zapier integration sends me a Slack message anytime.
You're frozen, Regina.
I'm sorry. Oh, what
You're
about
fine.
now? Okay.
Yep.
So basically anything that happens in Lawmatics or your CRM, you can get it to do whatever you want. Just like if you want to get a text message every time if you want to get a text messages anytime someone fills out an intake form or someone sends you a text message through your app, all of that can be done with the Zapier integration. So once you have something that has a robust entry conditions, that's the only other word I know for it. It basically means many different conditions to get into Zapier. So with Law Hustle, it was just when something goes from one stage to another, then something else happens. But that was it. That was the only option. With Lawmatics, it's a bunch of different things. If someone texts you, if someone emails you, if someone fills out a form, I mean, there's like 20 different ways that if someone does something in Lawmatics, I can then have some other program do something else is the easiest way to explain it.
Right. It's basically a trigger point. So anytime there is an action, there is a reaction, right? And you want to be able to say, for this action, have this reaction, right? If there is a new lead form that's filled out, create a new record in my system. If there is a new appointment scheduled, like send me a Slack message that I've got an appointment coming up now this afternoon. So there are a number of different like event-based triggers that will, create an activity in another solution that allows your systems to talk to each other. And if anyone needs help with Zapier, I can connect you with a consultant about that. And he's happy to chat with you. We work with him at SMITH.AI because some of it's a little bit intimidating. But the CRMs, and how do they differ from the intake software is an important conversation, because you might find that you're making sacrifices to, have everything all in one. And with the, connections that you can make between solutions now, you can say, I really like, my lead docket and Filevine to work together, or I really want it to be Lawmatics, but I want to keep Filevine, right? So here's the solution that I'm using to track my lead sources, the growth of my firm, where the leads are coming from, am I working them? And then I have an entirely different solution to say, this is actually where I do my casework and where we collaborate with my team, my paralegal on, who's contacting the, client about this question that we have, et cetera. Where's that document? That's not going to be a question that you're asking in a Lawmatics, because you're already doing the casework that's past the point of sort of the lead generation and working that lead. So we talked a little bit about shareable forms and why that matters. We talked about CRMs and intake solutions, and often they include forms. Like Lawmatics is a CRM, it's a lead management solution, but it also has their own forms. They will typically have some type of calendar integration as well to make it easy to schedule consultations and appointments. They may even have a e-signature integration so that you can sign new client agreements. And that might trigger when a new client agreement is signed and fully executed, and a payment is made if one is due. That might trigger a new record to be created in your case or practice management solution, right? So some of these things that you're probably doing manually can be automatically handled by the software based on the triggers that you set up. So it's completely in your control, but you are automating something that would otherwise take team time, which is, part of the reason that we're, getting Regina while she's on vacation, because she doesn't have to have her team or herself work so much during the day to get this stuff moving. So one of the things that is also important is, like, with this workflow, you're also thinking about what happens when you've got a client who's, qualified or not qualified. It's really important that you think about the reputation and experience your firm is giving, even at the point where you're almost ready to dismiss them. So, for example, Regina, there's, this question here: is a client pre-qualified? If you're on the third row in the first column, yes goes to intake, right? But no has like a few different options: decline, send a referral, refer to the Atlanta State Bar. Have you documented all this? Because that is potentially a source of a positive review for you. It's potentially a source of a client in the future. Maybe they're not ready. They come back to you and they say, I've, gathered the funds with my family's help, or I've had it, I'm finally ready for a divorce, or, whatever the case may be. Or you have a referral, and then that firm you referred to refers back to you, right? So either way, this is really a business building activity. It's not the time to say, we're not working with the firm, and this is like, I don't need that to be part of my process. It's documented here because, of how much of an impact it can make on your business. And remember, like, these are members of your community. Typically, these are maybe for trademarks. If you're practicing, across the country, you might not, run into someone in the supermarket, but, the world is a fairly small place. And you do find that the reputation is a lot easier to bring down than to build up, which obviously takes a lot of time to accrue all those online reviews. The more you can get through delivering a good client experience, the better. Seize those opportunities to say, I'm going to refer you to a firm I really recommend, instead of, go back to your Google search, basically. So, Regina, is there anything you want to, touch on there?
Just that, obviously this is my process for criminal and PI. You're going to want to cut out some steps because you want to get those people signed up right away, or at least a call right away. So obviously I do this intentionally, down the process, because I want to do a lot of pre-qualification because I'm cherry picking clients. But there's a way, obviously, you can take out steps. I mean, I could, after the first pre-qualification, just set them for a paid consult, but I personally just don't want to meet with anyone unless my paralegal has talked to them, that I've reviewed the notes. I can give them a range for the initial fee, which does tend to be quite high, and that has been communicated to the client, and they say that it's okay. So that definitely is going to cut down on the number of consultations that I have, but that's okay with me for where I am. If that's not okay with you, then just, cut that out. Don't do that.
Right. I mean, so, one of the things that obviously is involved here is the consultation. So let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, we don't have a ton of time left, but I think that's often a question that crops up: is how do I determine, if I'm going to charge for a consultation, especially if you don't have a ton of calls coming through and you want to be working with as many new clients as you can and building up your business and, keeping yourself busy. How can you balance, like, charging for consultations, or making sure that it's not too easy and you're not wasting time, while with the best potential clients, making sure that they're not feeling put off by, part of your intake experience?
Yeah, I advertise paid consults only. So if you go anywhere, you'll see on my website, $400, 45-minute call. However, sometimes I will do a free discovery call. If it's a referral, I have one, I got an email maybe last night at 8 p.m., hit one button, assigned it to my intake person, and just said free discovery call. And that's because it was referral from a known source. The person happens to be a celebrity, so I know they have money. It's a practice area that I do, and they have a case that's already pending. So that's what I pretty much call an on fire case. I mean, it's a warm lead because they are going to hire somebody. It's just a matter of, who. It's a little bit different than someone just kind of gathering information for a divorce. So in that case, because it's kind of a warm lead, it's pre-qualified because it's come from a known referral source, and I know that they have the ability to pay, and it's in the county that I want to practice, and the case has already been filed. I already looked it up, and the opposing counsel is not insane. These are all very good things for me. So I just said free discovery call. So we've set that person up for a free discovery call. So it's just a case by case basis. If someone has a ton of questions, I can't get it done in 20 minutes. So I just say, you just need the 45-minute call. If it's a case that's already pending, I usually will do the free discovery call because, again, it's a person that is going to hire someone. It's just a matter of who. So I just kind of take it on a case by case basis and feel it out, and offer some people free discovery calls, and I have a pretty high retention rate on those calls. Everybody else I put to the paid consultations, but I really am only doing maybe 1 or 2 paid consultations a month. The rest are discovery calls, and it's not that many, maybe 3 or 4, but they usually retain. So.
Well, and here's the thing, you're not in the business of giving consultations. It's not like the majority of your income is coming from consultation. Right. Like the charging for the discovery call is a mechanism to say, like, are you serious? And getting people to show up and making sure that they're self-selecting, that they understand that, you're going to charge them a certain fee if they do engage. And are they in the right ballpark? Or is that even too much for them? Because that's a really good signal for down the line, is payment going to be problematic, right? And for those who, have a sensitivity to it, I've seen in some cases crediting the consult fee to the bill. So if there, is an intolerance for those consultation fees, or you're going against what the market dynamics are in your local area, you might say, look, everyone gives a free consultation, and it's really hard for me to charge for a consultation. One, you might be signaling to the market that you're delivering something of superior quality and you might not want to change. Or you might say, look, I'm going to continue charging, but it'll be credited to your first bill, so it's not actually an additional cost, right? So there are a few different options that you can navigate there. Obviously making sure that you look at the bar rules, because, if you're charging for a service, are you able to say, that I'm not your attorney, attorney-client privilege, et cetera. So the other thing here is, the script. So Regina has shared her script that she has, with SMITH.AI, and I'll make sure, for some reason I can't.
I don't think you can click on that, but I can post the link. It's also, if anyone's in my group, Laura, in the beach group, all my crap is posted in the main there. But I can post the link directly to that. Find it.
Yeah. So what this is basically, different ways of handling different types of callers, because what we've covered today is, how do we handle these potential clients? But we know existing clients call, we know that court staff calls, different constituents and maybe referral partners are calling, your mom's going to call, whoever's going to call. You can't have just like one set of instructions for your phone call. So, this is something that Regina has laid out really nicely. She's also included, what happens for a sales call or spam, pretty self-explanatory, but sometimes, a sales call might be, take down that information. It might just be that person who I'm looking to hire for my Facebook ads. And for, any known reason, SMITH.AI is not going to be able to identify someone who calls who's really salesy. We're not going to take a decision and make it for you. We need to be told, do you want us to actually take that seriously or not? And then what are the details around, like, here are areas that are handled or not handled. What are the keywords that we can help identify on the calls to say, like, oh, you mentioned prenup, or you mentioned guardianship, or you mentioned POA. Are those things that are typically, indicated as being qualified or indicated as being not qualified, right? So that's information that you want to share, because that is information that a paralegal might have, or internal training, might get you. But if you're working with a receptionist service, it's not necessarily going to be the case that we know all the ins and outs of every single firm. We work with thousands of businesses. So this gets that in-house feel for a receptionist service at the lower cost, so that Regina can spend her extra savings on that paralegal, on the intake coordinator, on those other resources that she needs to invest in. The last thing that I'll share here, and I know we only have 5 minutes left, and if there are any questions, we're happy to answer them. The follow-up is absolutely critical. So we've talked a lot about the initial first call that comes through. The follow-up is really what's going to determine, all right, so you've got, 67% of clients saying like they're basing their decision on that first call or email being responded to by the firm immediately. You're picking up the first call, you're really likely to get the business. But there are a number of clients who don't make that decision on that first call, and you need to continue to follow up with them. They have a consultation, they get warm transferred to your firm, and they talk to you right away. Whatever that is, if you're not following up at least 6 times, you are lacking the confidence that they are ready to actually work with a firm, and you need to continue to follow up. People are busy. They have lives, they have kids at home, they have elderly parents, they have, jobs that are very demanding. It's not necessarily the case that you're bothering them until they tell you that you're bothering them, or they've made a decision otherwise. Continue to follow up with them, because that is also very low-hanging fruit and will give you a return if you have that activity happening for your firm. So that's something that SMITH.AI can do with outbound calls. It's also something that you could do yourself or have as sort of a mandatory part of the process of your firm. Obviously, it's time consuming, and that's a lot of the reason why people outsource it to us instead of handling it themselves. And it would, be based on your firm's growth stage. So for Regina, she might have so much demand that she doesn't have to follow up a ton, because there's enough people who are coming in that want to work with her. But for many firms, if not most firms and businesses in general, you're going to need to follow up, and not necessarily be in the luxurious place that Regina finds herself. So there is,
that can be done automatically too. So don't think that you're actually sitting there banging out these emails. You're creating workflows, and you can have exit conditions. So as soon as Smith takes the message and fills out the intake form, they're immediately getting a text message and an email from us with homework, like, hey, thanks for calling us. Someone's going to give you a call back. It sets expectations. And then also says, in the meantime, you need to get blah, 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 blah. So yes, that's what this is. So this is what you need to gather, if you're going to work with us, or anybody really. So with PI and criminal, you can say, we'll give you a call back whenever. In the meantime, you need to gather this, 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 and this. So they feel like they have homework to do. It makes it a little easier for them to wait for the call. So then the follow-up can be, you can send another email or text a couple of days later. Here's some reviews about the firm. Here's some videos that are specific to, what they called about. I only have 3 follow-ups, because just with family law, I think it's weird to follow up more than that, but that's just my own personal thing. And then I can't remember what my 3rd one is, but the exit conditions are, if they schedule an appointment or they say stop, then obviously we stop. Or if they're disqualified, or if I disqualify them for some reason, then they exit the workflow. But until that happens, they're just getting all this stuff automatically, and I'm not really doing anything. And sometimes people will respond. Sometimes people will respond to that 3rd email and say, hey, I'm ready to go forward. And I'm like, okay, I don't even remember you, because that was like 3 weeks ago, but okay. Because it's all kind of happening behind the scenes without me, having to have hands on it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a great point, and we can end there, as just a brief conversation that we had today. Think about not only sort of the inbound, but also the outbound. It's a holistic approach that we recommend taking to your intake, which I think we've demonstrated today. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Regina, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. And as we mentioned, there are the resources and links available to you to get all the slides, and also many more that Regina has put on the shared drive. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out. Obviously, we're both in Regina's group, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.